Okay, I think I just got to go ahead. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the stream. My name is Ray Anthony Height, and I am going to teach you my process on how to draw Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Um, okay, so, I'll give you a quick lesson, I guess, on not only just the process, but the way I figure out things and kind of the basic idea of drawing. Um, it's all about shape. So let's see, start revealing some layers here. As you can see, this one is what was advertised. So, and I completed it, and we're going to go and kind of break down the process of all of this as I reveal some of these layers. So this is clearly the sketch layer. Let's move this over a little bit. Um, Bring this up. As you can see here, there's my palette for the colors that I used, and this is the sketch. Now, usually when I try to figure out whatever the piece is, um, one of the main things I try to focus on, depending on the size and kind of energy or whatever of the piece, I try to figure out a space, like how much or the shape of the spaces to be occupied. So let me give you a little demonstration. So when I first started and trying to figure out, okay, well, I need to do like a bust size of this piece. Um, I wanted to figure out the shape and how can I put this giant dinosaur and this tiny little lunella like together in a bust size where I can get them both in where she's not too small or he's not too big. So I thought of like a graphic image, and I'm going to use this to show you. So I figure if this was, the size of a paper, right, something like this, and I was like, okay, I need to fit something cool in that way, a vertical way. Let's say if it was, um, I don't know. I mean, depending on the display, on the sheet. So what I would do if I know I have this type of vertical area and I wanted to kind of fill up the whole thing, there's different ways I could have gone about it. But I thought, a cool shape with a double dinosaur as the background, taking up a lot of space is kind of like this. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely thought that would be pretty cool shape. So here's the fun part. The fun part is trying to figure out how can I put two characters within this bounding area. So that's my binding area. So then I kind of figure out the shapes of the characters. Now, let's go back or move some things forward. All shapes in drawing are basically going to be some variation of circle, triangle, square. It's more like a rectangle, but and they're varying 3D versions of those shapes. So, like pyramid or a box. Well, that sucked. But let's do this. Because we need to think about things in 3D space. And of course, a sphere, but the way you see a sphere is kind of like this. So, where there's clearly a center line that goes through, and it also has sides. So even if I was to shade something in, just to give it a little bit more volume and depth here. If the light's coming this way. So now it's the same thing, it's just in 3D space. So those are the things we're basically going to be working with these shapes. And I'm going to leave this here so you can see exactly how I apply those shapes to breaking down the figure. And we're going to get start big and work small. So let's take the biggest part, which is devil. And devil, the first thing I think of in this space is probably the skull area, which is circle. And then here, because I know that there is kind of like, it's all in 3D space, I think about the sides of the box because the muzzle, his mouth, kind of like a box to me, but it's like a bulging box. So I think about it in sides. But the first thing I want to think about is what direction his face is going in. So as you can kind of see, it's going in that direction. So what I do is I kind of like divide that circle in the direction I want that face to go. And then I think, okay, so how will I divide the box? Here's one side of that box. Here's the top side of that box. And here's the front side of that box. And this box actually gets smaller as it goes down. So I hope you guys can see that. So now we have a circle or sphere. We actually have several boxes or squares that lead into a box, to a shape. And then it's kind of an upside down triangle, or two if you want to look at it. So let's say this shape here, which is really his neck kind of coming down into a V. And then there's your triangle. And then here's your other triangle kind of hidden behind there. So there we go. We have one circle or sphere, a box, which is made up of 3 different squares and 2 triangles, or a diamond shape, any variation of that. So that's how we got devil. Now let's do Lunella in another color. Hopefully one that can be seen. Okay, here we go. So the next step is Lunella. How are we going to break this down? Well, she's got this like, it's a box, but it's a bulging box because I think about the whole piece. So this is where everything in her face is. It's got that like that boxer's kind of headgear thing going on she's got. And then, I kind of split that. I divide that as well. And I know her eyes are going to go here. But the box is still there. It's got corners. You're just kind of bowing out a little bit because, the head's round. And then her hair is usually in puffs. So I was like, how can I design it? I could, do this cool thing where Natasha Bustos, who is incredible, would do this thing with like a bunch of little circles like this. But I always kind of saw her with these like cool puffier afro puffs. So, and it's easier to kind of get the idea. So since I'm teaching this how to draw, I thought it would be better to go that route. So let's make them circles. Make the puff puffier. It's kind of got a Mickey Mouse thing going, except with like a square head. And then she's got her goggles, which go over her glasses. And her eyes are right there. So just think of the eyeball right on that line. And her goggles would be there. Oh, that's terrible. It's like googly, but. And so at that point, now we have her little afro puff hair, which is pretty cool. And we have the bounding box. And inside the bounding box is her face, which is a circle. So we pretty much broke that whole thing down. And then her body is also a bulging box, more like a bulging rectangle because of the rib cages in there, the shoulders, clavicle, all that technical stuff. And then her shoulders are like half circles. I mean, you could draw the whole circle, which is cool, but it's half circles and where the shoulders would be. And from here, we have a little space because it's usually, I would call it like, depending on the size of the person, when you draw kids, their heads are usually much bigger. So there's always that space for the neck. And there's something called the pit of the neck. And I'm going to show you guys how to drop that in where this, like the bounding square is, which is basically like where that collarbone, your collarbone is. If you guys can like touch your collarbone, that's what it is. There's a dip here. And the neck from that side will connect with that dip because there's a pit, right? There's a pit where everything is, or your head connects to your body and all that. From here on, we just draw lines for our arms. And that's pretty much it. So we got the general shape going on there. And let's get rid of that. So anyway, so we have that circles, squares, the whole shebang. Even the moon itself is circle. So that's how I got here. Of course, with a bunch of detail and whatnot, but you got to start big and work small to work in all of those details. So the next step I ended up doing, I tightened those things up. Like I added the eyes, details of the nose, and same thing with devil. There's a certain shape that he has here, which is like little triangles. Well, it's circles and triangles. So let me add another layer. And when I got that shape, first I did an oval here. And then it's like rounded little jaggy things, or. The same thing on that side. So what I do on this side, I kind of draw a line to kind of, guide my lines and my eye on this side. And it's the same thing. So just look for those shapes. Look for the circles, boxes, and triangles. And just kind of shape them any way you need to get where you're going. Same thing with the eyes. And when you really break it down, there's different pieces. You just have to kind of like, everything kind of has a rhythm. So sometimes what I'll do, I'll use like the curve of something to create another curve. So watch this whole like rhythm of how things connect, because that's what in life and drawing and everything else, things connect in a certain way. So if I do this, see there's a rhythm there to that, which goes here. Same rhythm, which goes here. And it's very, wavy. Everything's kind of wavy. Even if I wanted to take this rhythm to his little eye spikes, there's a rhythm like a wave. So there's different ways of doing it. The more knowledge you gain as you draw, because that's the only way you get better. You have to keep drawing like over and over and over and over again until it's second nature, and just observe. Observe rhythms, observe shapes. And that's kind of how you find things. That's how you kind of see how things connect and work together. And once you get that, it'll be so easy to find the rhythm in everything you're looking at. At that point, it's kind of the same thing with the face of Lunella. There is a rhythm to all of this. Smooth that over. Let's see. So with the roundness, like we already talked about, that circle, there's a rhythm of the goggles. And then there's this like eye line, right? Where the pupils kind of sit and they move back and forth on those things. So it's like circles within circles within circles. So like concentric circles. So imagine the eye here. And then the rim of the goggles on the inside and the rim of the goggles on the outside. Just like that. So there's a rhythm, right? Circle, 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 circle. Until you get to the amount of circles you need. Even her nose is a bit of a circle. So I think I got a question, which is really cool. And that question is, How do you figure out the amount of detail to add to a character without making it overbearing or too hard, um, or too hard to consistently draw? So when I guess it depends on the story. So for Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, this story is all ages, and it's not a deep dark story or anything like that. It's pretty fun. Give me just a second. So you want to make it light and you want to make it bouncy and kind of like um, like a cartoon. So when you look at cartoons, they are filled with simpler shapes, and it's not a whole lot of detail. I mean, comics you can do a lot more. You can put a lot more detail in it, but what you really want to do is it's all about silhouette. So if I were to, and that was the other thing, I was going to get to that part. You guys are ahead of me on that. Um, it's all about silhouette. So if we just did this, I'm going to show you guys something very, very cool. Silhouette is everything. It's how we can tell who a character is and without any detail. If you get the silhouettes right, you typically get the character right. And all the rest is kind of like icing on the cake. So that's either, let's say if I refined it a bit because that's definitely more Mickey Mouse like. So if I did, let's do it typically how Lunella's hair is. Let's erase that stuff. Um, and the cool thing about Lunella is like you could put her hair in pretty much any style. So a little less Mickey Mouse. Oh yeah, that's like hardcore uh, Lunella. So and that's basically it. It's all about the silhouette. And if I did the same thing with Devil, let's erase the silhouette of Lunella, and let's just do Devil, and you'll see it works the same way. So that is like the power of a good drawing. If you can do it without detail and just worry about the silhouette, and it kind of like totally sells, oh, I know who that is, then you've done it. So always check your silhouettes to see if you are true to the character, right? So, because if I had done something else, I mean, let's say I did a silhouette that was like this. I mean, technically, that's pretty much Devil, right? Except he's facing front, like his snout and everything is forward. But I don't know. I don't know what that could be. But this, like, you got an idea. So let's get rid of all that. Go back to that. So that's pretty much how I came to this point. And let's get rid of this. So the next step would be inking. And inking, that's when you get all into the extra detail, the rendering and whatnot. Um, oh, that's the wrong thing. Sorry. There we go. Ink layer. So on the ink layer, I'm just refining, cleaning up all the lines and stuff and making it super clear. So you see how clear that ink layer is? Let's take off the sketch layer. And I do have another question I'm going to get to. So that way, we have, colors can come in and kind of like do some really cool, coloring here and really make those characters pop. But it depends on your inking style as well. I mean, some inkers, they're in there and they're all, masters of their craft, but it's like they add all the extra details and stuff like that because really the job of the inker is to enhance the pencils. So if you're inking a piece, then your job is to send, your pencils over to the inker. They get in there and they really should be bringing out the absolute best in the pencils, and it's a collaborative effort, because, you know, that's what comics is. Comics is a collaborative effort, to make a beautiful product. So, but with this, just for this demonstration, I wanted to keep it super simple so you guys could see exactly what the next step is in the process, at least my process. And, you can still see the shapes, right? Circles, the like bulging box, right? Circle, circle. Here we go, more bulging box, more circle. So as long as that's clear, we're good. So then the next thing we do after that, as a matter of fact, let me get to this question. So one of the questions I got was, wow, a lot of questions. Let's see, what comic should I be adding to my pull list that I'll be working on? Well, nothing really to kind of put out there right now for stuff that I'm currently working on. Well, I have a side project that I'm doing, which is my own character called Midnight Tiger. And the Kickstarter finished a couple months ago. And I'm kind of working on that, with the whole thing with COVID and stuff like that. I mean, things have been interesting, but I'm still working. I'm still doing commissions and stuff like that. I have a few commissions I'm working on. So, but for stuff in the past, I did an issue of Miles Morales Spider-Man. I want to say, did it come out earlier this year? Marvel's Voices, which was really, really great because I work with James Monroe Iglehart, who is a brilliant person, not just on Broadway, but in comics. And let's see, I actually have done, I want to say, 5 issues of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. But, I'm the only Ray Anthony Height, so if you Google my name, a bunch of stuff will pop up, and I definitely recommend checking that out. I actually worked on, with the independent stuff, a group of people, Vito Del Sante and Sean Isaacs, who is at Marvel right now. I think Sean is working on Fantastic Four, and he and Vito worked on Stray. A book that I'm currently reading is Forgotten Home by Erica Schultz, and that is phenomenal. I don't know, though, I definitely recommend those books. WatchGuard. WatchGuard is actually, I want to say, a role-playing game. It's by Charlie McKelvey. So those things are really, really awesome. So check those out as well. Let's see. Let's move to the next thing, and then after I go through that, I'll answer yet another question. Okay, so my next step was to do the flats on the color. Just so as you can see, I kind of worked out the color palette here. And on that color palette, these are Devil's colors, and then I usually try to, keep some of the coloring consistent between the characters too. And so the yellow I use for both Lunella and Devil's Eyes, a couple of different things, but you got to have your color palette ready. You could do a lot of searching, but if you have a base color for everything, it makes things quicker. So let's open up those flats, and here we are. So I made sure everything was cleaned up, and once I laid in my flats, I kind of locked that layer. I locked the transparency, so if I was going to do like my tones, which I'll show you next, at that point it wouldn't bleed out. So let's say I open that up, and this is my my tone layer, at least my darker tone layer. And so if I take off the transparency lock, and let's say I go in there, and I try to, let's see, go outside the lines with, like this, Well, that's not proving my point at all. Let's add another layer here and then I'll show you guys what I mean. Yep, I'm totally not like messing up here. Just so I can try to demonstrate a thing, right? So let's move that here, this layer, and then take that off. Okay. So with this, like it goes outside the lines completely. But if I add that, it completely takes it out. So it keeps everything in this particular layer. And currently, I am using Clip Studio Paint, which I love. I mean, as far as comic stuff is concerned, it's a one-stop shop. Like you can, color and ink and do all your drawing and lay out your pages, and it's just amazing. You get guidelines. It's just a wonderful program for creating comics. So the next thing is, as you see with the tones, and here's the thing about those tones. When I'm doing these tones, I have to figure out what the light source is. So here, this is my light source. It's coming in this way. And that will create, if everything is round and is going through the shape, all the light is hitting at the top, and then the dark is going to be darker on the sides where there's no contact with the light. Same thing with Lunella, like it's light here in the hair, and it's kind of like coming through here where, let's say the top of her boxer's like guard is creating a shadow here, and where her cheeks and stuff are fuller, so they're kind of peeking out. The light's hitting that, but you see the shadow that her goggles are casting. That's like, like you have to kind of think about how, light is hitting one object and blocking light on another object, on the surface of another object. So with that, we're going to go to the highlights because there are parts that are closer to the light than others. And that is going to be this next layer. And I usually on my tones, I use a color burn or a linear burn. So what it does is it takes the color, the flat color underneath, and it does different things. A color burn will try to, enhance and layer on top of the flat color. So you get kind of a good mix of those two colors, but as a darker tone because the burn part makes it darker. So you're burning that particular color. A linear burn is almost like a dark overlay. And there is color to it because depending on what color you choose as your dark tone, it's going to add that to it, but it's mostly creating a deeper shadow. So going back to the light, so here is where the lighter lights are. And I haven't done any like extra highlights in it because I want to keep it as simple as I can so I can move on to actually demonstrating all this stuff. So you see here it's a bit lighter. Let's enhance that a little bit. And you kind of get the full like vision of how this is going. So here's your base color. That's like flat with no light, no anything. I mean, not no light, but just base color light. Here's the shadow of that, which is a darker version of that base color. And then here's a lighter version of that base color. So if you just keep it in the three tones, keep it simple, you still can create a pretty solid three-dimensional image, and it can look cool. So, and it's the same thing here. If we pull this down, and there's highlights here. So there's just a little bit of that lightest light right here on the top of Lunella's cheek. a little bit on the bottom lip here, and because her chin's poking out a bit, that light's hitting that. Um, Definitely here at the top where shoulders and all that stuff is catching the most light. There's little speckles of light here. If I enhance that a bit more, because I dropped this down to a smaller percent, you can see it really kind of pop. Like you saw that side kind of really get brighter. So that is the way I would go about that. Now, there's always like a little extra, right? There is a lens in these goggles. So I added a completely different layer to put that lens in so that, it's see-through, and I brought down the opacity, which you can see her eyes through them. This is what it looks like without me bringing down the opacity. Because I put that on an add layer. It just kind of adds a brightness to it. So I think for that, that is the general process of how I got to this image. And we're going to actually go into demonstrating that in a moment. If there's any questions, I'm going to answer a few before we move on. One of the questions is, what other characters have I worked on, and what would I like to work on? Oh, wow, that's a really good question. It's a ton. I worked on the X-Men. I forgot about mentioning that. I worked on, let's see, Black Panther. It was X-Men, Wakanda Forever. That was a cool book to work on. I got to draw Storm, so that's awesome. I have worked on, X-Men Blue. Me and Cullen Bunn, who we created kind of these mutants of Madripoor called the Raksha, and that it was in X-Men Blue #6. That was pretty awesome. Let's see. The characters I've worked on. Fearsome Four. It was, was like this whole thing where they had Howard the Duck, She-Hulk, Frankenstein's monster, and was it Man Thing? No, it was Nighthawk. Oh, sorry, Brandon Montclair, who is a co-creator of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, by the way. That was the first time Brandon Montclair and myself worked together, so that was great. And we've been good friends and for a while. So, but that was kind of a funny book. Like it was like the Fantastic Four. I don't know if anybody remembers where Wolverine and Ghost Rider and the Punisher. I know I'm forgetting some, and Spider-Man. They all became the Fantastic Four replacement. So in Fearsome Four, the Fearsome Four fought the alternate version of the Fantastic Four, and it was hilarious. It was super cool. So I got to draw all those guys in there. That was really, really great. But as far as characters I want to work on, I want to go back to the X-Men office, and I want to do something with Prodigy and Sync since the whole Krakoa thing happened. That's definitely in the back of my mind. I would love to work on that. That would be pretty awesome to get those characters. Be back in the Spider-Man office. I enjoy working on Miles Morales, but I actually worked on Spider-Girl. It was one of my first assignments, and that was really, really great. I have a certain love for Spider-Girl. Wonder Man. I'm a huge fan of Wonder Man. Actually, I'm a huge fan of the New Warriors. That's kind of like my dream project. And the New Warriors was a huge influence on me. And I just absolutely loved it. I loved that series, and it was a huge influence on all the things that, as far as superheroes and stuff goes, with Teen Heroes, more so than Teen Titans. As much as I love Teen Titans, it was great. So, those are a few off the top of my head that would be pretty awesome. And my favorite hero, I would say, is Spider-Man, because that was kind of the coolest thing about Into the Spider-Verse, where it was Miles' show, but they said something that was very poignant. Anybody could wear that mask. It could be anyone there as Spider-Man. He is everybody. When he puts on that mask, he could be anyone. He has real life issues. It's Peter Parker. Like, Peter Parker is the main character. Spider-Man is just his job. You know what I mean? because he's the guy, and that's what I love about Spider-Man. And he's just somebody who is dealing with things in a way that most of us would normally deal with it. He doesn't necessarily he gets sick. Like he doesn't necessarily always want to be the good guy, but he feels a responsibility to be that, and he knows that that's what he should do, and he does it because all these decisions aren't easy, But somebody has to do it. Somebody has to stand up. So that's what I love about him. And clearly Miles is right along there, right on top of that. So, yep, Spidey's my favorite. All right, so let's see. You guys ready to get started on the whole process? I'm sure you are. And let's go. So let's move over because I've already kind of started a super loose sketch of what we're trying to do here. And we're going to kind of take our time going through this. But let's refine the sketch, and we're going to use all the same tools, and you're going to kind of see my thought process on this. There is a piece. Oh, I'm very sorry, you guys. I think I missed something on this other end. So one thing about Devil is he has these cool spots. And in those spots, I usually, if I'm going to color them, I don't draw them in. I just color them in because it looks like it's part of his skin. So let me go back up here. I'm going to take off the sketch layer because that's kind of interfering. It's right here. Cool, right? That is just awesome. That's the thing I really love about being able to color some stuff, even though I don't consider myself a colorist in the least, especially when you have people like Tamara Bonvillain and Edgar Delgado, and these just geniuses. So this is nothing, but it was fun. But the cool thing is, like, you see how cool, like, it kind of like layers right on top of the skin as part of the pattern. And if it had an outline, it would stand out way too much, at least for me. So I love that it feels like this is part of that color, and it just layers right on top and not really a separate piece, just one whole piece. So, okay. But yeah, I put that on a completely separate layer. Let's go back. Let's get that sketch back. Or at least the beginnings of a sketch. So let's go in there and define some shapes. And I don't know how much time we have, but let's see if we can complete this together. So as you can see, I'm just going to kind of lightly go over what we've done already. And I want you guys to kind of follow along with what's happened here. Let's get this color set. So here's that circle again, right? It's right in here. That's the first thing I thought. And then that, like, the bounding shape is very similar. Let me go back to that. So it's, I wanted it to be a long profile. And here's the cool thing about, like, composition. Let's talk about that. Even though it's kind of a complicated thing, this is a horizontal piece. And to go into it like that, I wanted to figure out how I can fit Devil into that. I had this idea where maybe I was going to put, like, him lying down. I'm going to do this. Him kind of like lying down, and this would have been like the rest of his body, his little tiny baby dino arms here. And then let's say the rest of his body was like here. The hind legs would be here. Something like that. But I was like, it's getting too long. And, and then like have his tail kind of like draped around and kind of come back around and like that, something pretty cool. But it was getting just way too long, and I didn't know how much time I was going to have exactly. So I was like, yeah, it's too much work, and I'm teaching. I'm not actually doing a finished piece to go into a book or anything. So Uh, so anyway, I thought that would be a cool idea. And I decided, no, let's just keep it simple. And same thing with the silhouette, right? So if I had to figure out what the silhouette is, again, here's a silhouette of Devil. You know exactly who it is, especially with this like snout spike and the ridges of his brow and stuff like that. So you know who he is. Lunella is the same difference, and I put her in a pose where I thought we could see not only who it was, but it was a clear silhouette. Like she's kind of lying on top of Devil's snout. So let's go in there and start refining, because here's our circles, right? And let's go in here and kind of like get some of these ridges together, the little puffs, which I love. And here's that bulging box, because the other reason why it's got the bulging box too, Lunella's hair kind of peeks out right at the top because it's open at the top, so can't forget that. And it kind of like hovers over her goggles, because she still wears her glasses. She just puts the goggles over her glasses. And here is that circle in there. And she's, not very big in this piece, so we don't have to go into serious detail and, to really do a great Lunella drawing. Detail is not required. So here's that eye line. This is where her eyeballs are going to sit. And you need that. Even though she's got on goggles, you want them to appear like, they're actually over her eyes. Because if her eye line was here and her goggles are up here, that's not going to work out. So let's put that back in there. And her eye line and her eyeballs are there. And remember those circles within circles. I just want to get a guide for myself, so when I do start inking, I know exactly where to go, what I'm thinking about doing, and that's really it. So much drawing is done in your mind before you even start putting, the digital pencil to the paper. You need to have a plan. I mean, I'm not saying that, kind of like stream of consciousness drawing is bad. It's actually quite great. I mean, some amazing ideas come from that. But you have to kind of plan, how you're going to do a thing, and the best way to do that is to think it through. Sometimes it helps to think it through with like a little pad or something like that, and you kind of jot down your ideas and see which ones work. So that's also very cool. Look at that, like the sleeve, just to talk about shapes again. Her sleeve, that's like with her extended arm, that's a box. So we got that box in there. Here's an oval because it's kind of slanted in a different direction for her circle, for the moon that's on her emblem there. And then we're doing the straps that go to her backpack with all her cool gadgets, like the helicopter gadget that I love. And she's got, I feel like I want to put her rollerblades, Amy Reeder also. I got to give props to Amy, co-creator of Moon Girl. So, I would be remiss if I did not talk about Amy. So I could, put her rollerblades and stuff on there. I don't know. I think that's cool. And then she's got these like shorts and like a unitard thing under them. It's super cute. So she's got this big boxing glove that's a part of her arsenal, which is actually quite devastating. And she's 9 years old. She's the smartest person in the Marvel Universe. And part of her is doing this stuff for fun. Like, you guys have to read the last few issues of the series where her and Reed Richards has it out. And it's just hilarity. And also issue 42 where she meets Spider-Man for the first time. I don't want to give up what's actually happening in that issue, but it's super fun. She's got a bunch of pouches with all of her various gadgets also on this belt, but we're not really going to focus on that because this image, when we look at it, it's tiny. I mean, it's not tiny, tiny. Like you know who it is, but um, we don't have to go into super detail. But if we have the shapes, that's why yet again shapes are important. Uh, you know, once you get into shapes, the colors and everything will kind of take that in. Um, and if you want to throw out any more, like maybe one or two more questions, if there's anything you want to ask, that would be really cool. So let's continue. I think let's kind of straighten out the fingers a little bit on Lunella here. I mean, for me, I can kind of just go from here, but um, for you guys watching, it's a demonstration. Now I'm gonna give you a quick demonstration of the hand. It's easy to kind of figure out. It's like a loaf of bread, right? Here's the palm, and then let's say the thumb's here. So let's do a triangle for the thumb, and the bones of the fingers kind of stick out. So you don't have to really super define them in the beginning. But everybody thinks that that first finger is the longest. It is not. This finger is the longest. And they kind of go in an arc like this, right? These fingers are pretty much the same. And then you got the pinky finger, the smallest, even though the middle finger isn't that long. It's about like that. So, and then there's like a knuckle here, and then that little digit kind of goes out. So what you have, let's do red. And don't forget the spaces. That's something that looks like that. And then of course, where the thumb is and the palm, and there you go. So there's your arcs. Right? And that's how we kind of do that. There's a hand. Of course, practice, practice, practice. Always, always practice. Okay. Let's go back to this. So we're finishing this up. Let's see. I think I want to erase some of that. All right, that's good enough for me. Okay, boxing glove. That was pretty much done, honestly. Um, I like to give Lunella, like she's 9, like 9, 10 years old. I like to give kids like a little pouch, a little tiny little belly there. Um, I don't know, it's like a cuteness factor to that. I dig that because 9-year-olds aren't typically in the gym hardcore. One question is, what level of excitement does it give you when I get to work on a character of color, especially for one big companies? It gives me the utmost excitement because of representation. I mean, there weren't a lot of characters of color that were, let's say, as cool or as awesome or as beloved as, let's say, Spider-Man or Captain America or Superman or something like that. Really until recently, and it's still not enough. It wasn't until Milestone where these characters are getting super super big. But even before then, Stan and Jack, and with Black Panther, and then Luke Cage and a bunch of other characters. It's cool, but there is a diaspora of people of color, and a lot of times it was the same type of character. I'm from the hood, and I'm whatever this is, and or I'm an ex thug or criminal, and I'm trying to redeem myself. Um, you know, it's not untrue that there aren't characters or people or whatever that's kind of like that. There's their motivation, but I was not like that, and I know a ton of people. The average person is just like the average person, like the average person of color, just like the average person anywhere. Um, so I would love to have seen that. Everybody's motivations are different, and that would be one of those things where you kind of have to explore that side of it. But Superb, for Lion Forge is one of my favorite assignments. Talk about diversity and inclusion. That was an amazing book to work on. And on that book, I got to do covers and help launch the book, and it was just really cool. And there was I think it took place in Youngstown, Ohio, and there was the main characters were a teenage young black girl and a kid with Down syndrome, and they were heroes. They were the heroes of that story, and it was awesome. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about inclusion. It's everybody, and I just totally get excited about those things. It doesn't stop me from working on, say, Green Lantern or Nova, or Quasar, another character I love. I love Quasar. But that being said, when I get a chance to work on characters of color, it's like a bonus, and especially to have a certain input on those characters. So yeah, that would be my take on that. So let's see. Excuse me. Any advice for drawing characters that appeal more than just me? Um, that's good advice. I would say research. Uh, Research is your friend, and there is no such thing as like not well. You can't do too much research, but here's kind of my way of thumb, my rule of thumb is that I can't draw well what I don't know how it works. So if I don't know how feathers work on a bird, then it would really be difficult to draw them in a convincing way, even in the most cartoony way possible. And that's tough. I mean, if I never seen a car from the 1930s and I'm trying to make it up as I go, it's not going to be convincing. I'm totally faking it, and it's probably more going to look like something I'm familiar with. So familiarize yourself with what your subject matter is, and you'll do an excellent job. The more information you have, the more ability you'll be able to draw from, literally and figuratively. Uh, all right, so let's get some inking going. We'll go back to this inking layer. I think that's good enough. For what we're trying to do here. Where's the inking layer? Here we go. All right. And let's start with Devil first because he's the biggest and probably the quickest to ink. Here we are. So with inking, it's all about, at least for me, like the outline. Same thing with the silhouette. If I have a good outline, or what I like to call a holding line, to hold the drawing, then that's the kind of thing that I gravitate towards as far as completing my drawings, or beginning, not completing, beginning to ink. And inking actually just, a quick lesson on that, at least based on what I know, is, oh, see, that's totally wrong. I was just gonna, so if, let's say the light source is coming this way, then my ink line will be thinner on the top. Every place where the light hits it, the ink line will be thinner. And every place where there's shadow, the ink line will be thicker. So I'm trying to keep that in mind as I am going through inking. So that's a little thinner, and if I feel like this isn't getting hit, I'll thicken that up. Same thing here. Like this will be a thinner line, and here is a thicker one. So just so we kind of get that sense, because there's, light is everything. We're already a third done inking Devil, and we just started. I got another question, and it is about art school. Is art school a must? Uh, and everyone says natural talent, that somebody's naturally talented, but should they go to art school? So here's the thing about art and art school. If you want to go to art school, you should go to art school. But I don't think it is required. Most of the things I did both, to be honest with you. Um, and it wasn't, you know, I think I had already learned quite a bit on my own because you have to be your own teacher. That's the thing about art. You're always going to be a student. I've been at this a long time. I started drawing when I was like 5 years old, and um, today I have a bunch of books on drawing still. So I'm going to rotate this a bit. Yeah, I have a bunch of books on drawing, and I still learn. I still study all the time. There's never really a time where you shouldn't be studying. There's always more to learn. But back to the whole idea of art school. If you want to go to art school and you feel like that will enhance your ability, you should do so. I mean, I'd never had a life drawing class until I went to art school, um, and that was pretty cool. Draw from life. That's another thing. All these great artists that you see, they draw from life all the time. Because once you get to a certain point, I mean, it's not to say that you can't be inspired or, work on stuff that the people whose artwork you really, really enjoy have worked on. I mean, I loved Arthur Adams. I love Alan Davis. Those guys are brilliant. Um, and there was a point where I was kind of like studying their work. But you get to a point where it's like you don't ask like how they do it, you ask why they do it. Why are they doing it this way? Not how are they doing it? Because when you ask how, that only gets you so far. That's only, I would say, a third of the information that you're looking for. For the most part, it's really, why they're doing a thing, and try to figure out who they studied. That's a kind of a super, super big deal because they didn't get there. They started out just like you did. And the idea of talent, okay, so here's the thing. It's not that I don't believe in talent. I think talent exists. It's really, all talent is kind of a natural acumen for something. But it's absolutely nothing. I think that's why I love anime so much because a lot of the shonen anime is always about how hard work beats talent. And that's super true. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you do nothing with it and if you don't hone it, the person who started out with less is going to surpass you. Just simple as that. So, I put more stock in your ability to learn and to gather new information, to build on top of whatever talent you had to be even better. Um, so that's kind of like my idea or my thoughts about the whole thing. But yeah, go to school if you feel like school is where it's at for you. Um, but never, if there's information that you can learn from anywhere, take it. That's really it. Let's see. As far as my preference for digital or traditional, I've been doing it so long now, even though I prefer traditional, uh, especially drawing. Inking, I prefer digitally. But as far as drawing is concerned, there's something about that feeling of paper and pencil or paper and pen or whatever your medium is, that roughness. Like you don't get the same. I have kind of a thing over my Cintiq, which I'm using a Cintiq 13 HD. I've had for, I think, over 5 years now. And there's this, I bought this like film called an onion skin or whatever they called it. And it's okay. It helped with the slickness, but the slickness is still there. And it's, you kind of have to adjust. But when you're drawing on paper, like you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Because you feel the graphite or whatever it is you're using, and you feel the grain of the paper. I mean, that is unless you're doing, something on slick paper. So yeah, I mean, traditional is for me. I love traditional, but digital, I got pretty good at it, and it helps get the job done. And there's more. I don't know, like when you're inking digitally, there's so many tools you can use, but there's something to be said for the happy accident of inking traditionally. Like sometimes you're like, you didn't intend to do a thing, and it's, oh, wait, this is better than what I was trying to do. And you just kind of stick with that. It's happened to me more than once, and I like when that happens. But, there's more control. So if you're a control freak, then yeah, digital is the way. That control, alt, delete, or whatever it is, erase, it's handy. Make no mistake, it's totally handy. But traditionally, there's something about, I don't know. Like I had just retweeted something from Mark Brooks, who's a friend of mine, and he's been painting for a while now. And I have seen a few of his pieces at cons up close, and you just, I don't know, you just can't mistake that kind of stuff. It's just so beautiful to see. So, and also you can't sell uh, digital copies like you can sell an original of something, you know. So that's the other end of that. So that's my take on digital and traditional. Everything has like a plus and minus, you know. Um, let's see. So here, let's just get back to talking about this art stuff here, which is why we're all here. Um, so I'm just about done with these outlines. And usually when you're done with the outlines, the rest is pretty quick. I'm trying to figure out how I want that to go. That's not bad. Yeah, going in with the detail, especially when you're trying to keep things simple, really most of the work is in the outline. And once I'm done with that, we'll just move on to flatting and then do some quick tones, and that'll be that. So a cool technique that I learned, I don't want to say recently, but um, let's say within the last 3 years, is when one surface is touching another surface and you can see it right at the line. You don't actually have to connect all the lines. I mean, so like this, even though it'll probably be easier, but I'll go in here later and do something cool with color. But if Lunella's kind of sitting right here and she's kind of sitting on the edge, at least for us, for our vantage, our point of view, I don't necessarily have to make all the lines connect. Um, so, that's pretty much the outline right there. And for you guys that want to see more of my work, you can, follow me here. Just pop that up real quick. But yeah, but you see, like we're done with the outline. Now we're going to just drop in some details. If I was doing this traditionally, I would actually have colored first and then inked on top of that, because that would have been so much easier. Um, because that way when I put the lines on top and I put the inks pop instead of the potential the inks being dulled by the color. So here, the next thing we're going to do is drop in some of those details. I don't know if you guys can hear in the background, my dog Max is waiting outside the office door because he wants to know everything that we do. And he's adorable, but he's got to know. Like, he's got to know what you're doing, who you're talking to, who's at the door. He wants to be part of the scene. So, sorry, buddy. And he's very needy. And, you know, we're guilty of accommodating him, so it's our fault. So I'm dropping in a few fun little details for Devil because we're going to keep it simple. Like, if you guys look at issue 42, my editor, who's God, super awesome, Chris Robinson, allowed me to basically do as close to my normal art style as possible on that piece, on that issue. So you'll see the way I drew Devil is very different than the way I had drawn him before. I like super went into detail, and that was a ton of fun. I'm not going to do that here, but if you want to see some of that stuff, be sure to pick up that issue, and that is the Spider-Man issue. That's not good. Let's put that there and erase this. Okay. But yeah, like, that was a lot of fun. Actually, he's one of the my favorite characters to draw. Actually, it's just you could do as little or as much as you want with Devil, and it's still Devil. Like, as long as the right silhouette, as long as the right pieces are in place, you know, it's unmistakable. Yeah, he's super fun to draw. I mean, and if you check out my sketchbook stuff online, you see that I draw Lunella anytime I can. I mean, I've drawn her, you know, of course, not as much as Natasha, but she's so fun. She's one of the few characters, much like Spider-Man, that I can just draw super fast. You know, with pretty decent accuracy. So Devil's pretty much done, honestly. Um, See how quick that was? Like, once you get all the drawing done, like the underdrawing, the rest is just fun. Like, I could go as detailed or as simple as I want to, but the important parts are done already. And all I'm doing is adding or subtracting as I go along. You know, because drawing is thinking. Guys, you got to remember that. Drawing is thinking. If you are thinking as you're putting down these lines, what this line means, what am I trying to suggest here? Because it doesn't always have to be exact. It can be whatever you want it to be, as long as the idea of the image, because that's what we're doing. We're putting down visual ideas. So as long as your idea comes across, it's successful. So let's see. Yeah, the coloring should be pretty quick. Let's zoom in on Lunella real quick, and then when I drop these last few lines in, we're just going to go right to it. I'm very curious. I mean, hopefully I try to give you guys kind of a decent enough lesson that you could take the idea, like with the shapes, breaking things down simply, take that with you, and it doesn't, you could use that on not just drawing Moon Girl, but whatever you want. Just, think big, work small. That's it. Like keep working until you break it down to where you're trying to get like kind of get it to go. Usually when I draw her, I like to have like her hair, peek out. It gives it a little bit of life. So I'll drop in something like that, and peeking through the sides of like the boxer's mask there. It's like personality. I'm not going to go into great detail here. Because when I start coloring, all that stuff will come out. That's the beauty of color. Oh, that wasn't right. So yeah, all of these different um, let's call them what they are. They're mistakes. Sometimes they're cool. They kind of teach you that that's a great thing about drawings. Like nothing's got to be perfect. As a matter of fact, I've heard the term style comes from the things that you don't draw well, or that's uh, kind of a little blip, on your drawing screen. Some of them are stylistic choices. Others not so much. Yeah, we're almost there, people. And thanks again for jumping on and joining the stream. Thank Marvel for having me on. So that's awesome. So yeah, you'll see here I'm kind of moving a little faster because we got to get to the coloring. And that's kind of fun because there's different ways in Clip Studio Paint that you can color to speed things up. And I'll kind of go over those. So you see how when you shrink it down, some of the details, like, they just don't matter. And that's pretty much it for her. Hi, Lunella. Okay, so let's pull out here, and there we go. So there's the inks. The inks are done. Well, let me do this. Hold on a second. The light is coming this way. So here's another thing. I could have like done an outline to drop in the solid black shapes, but I like doing this because I have a little more control, and it's like control chaos, which is fun. So here we go. So we got this thing going on here where it's like the little roundness and puffs of her hair are kind of like chaotic. There we go. That was fun. Okay, now let's get a little shadow here. All right. So let's get with the rest of this. Straighten this out, and let's go with the color. We're going to drop in some flats. So what I like to do is do an outline, let's go to the flat layer. I'm going to actually lock in my ink layer. So let's lock that in. And then go to the flats layer. And the transparency of that is locked in, so I'm going to unlock that. This is Devil's base layer. I brought my color palette here, so use the eyedropper, got that, and we're going to go to town. So I guess if I want to do this an easy way, there's a tool here that kind of like you block in the shape, like you lasso the shape, and it does it for you. Let's see. Yep, I'm running out of time here, so let's do this super fast. I'll make a bigger shape. Okay. Then we need yellow. Let's go back to red. There's some spots that I missed here. And I'll use the same red for Lunella's boxing glove, which packs a wallop. So usually when I color, I try to think also in layers. So let's say like her bodysuit underneath. We're going to do that. And then just all the other colors, I'll just start putting on top because that's what goes on top. Oh, I missed something, but that's okay. Yeah, let's go back to red. Because at this point I'm just kind of dropping things in just so I can rush through. I hate to say rush, but Yeah, we're going to color over that. Okay, let's clean some stuff up. Yep, there's a lull. Usually what happens is when I have to speed things up, that's when I get quiet. But that is not a bad thing, not entirely. If you guys have any more questions, that'd be cool. Maybe one more will be great. And that should take us through, depending on how much I answer. Yeah, unlike double, Wanilla's got a bunch of different colors. Let's see. Oh, that's not right. It's this one. There we go. Okay, I think we're done with the flats. Now I'm kind of just doing some quick cleanup. Again, not looking to be perfect, just neat enough to be decent. Okay, so there you go. Flats pretty much in there. And now we're going to go in here. Let's do some cleanup a little bit more. Let's see. Oh, a little too much. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of people don't like flatting. Um, it's not the most exciting part of coloring, that's for sure. And there are easier ways, to do it, with that tool I think I showed you guys earlier that basically does a lasso around the whole thing, and you can kind of go from there. Hey, not bad. Okay. Some small spots, but let's take care of those. And a little bit here. Oh, there we go. Hold on a sec here. Okay, so flattening process, not too terrible. Yeah, the fun part is the tones. And I usually go um, for something that's like a dark gray or, hold on a sec here. I'll select the transparency. But yeah, I usually go for like a dark gray that has like a little blue or a purple or something in there. So we know now that the light is coming this way. Um, let's start dropping some stuff in here. So this part of Devil's like jowl, let's make this a little bigger, is rounded. Oh, so when I lock the transparency, you see how I can't color outside the lines. That's how that's supposed to work. So yeah, this process of dropping in flats, well, on Devil, it probably is going to take 5 minutes at the most, but for the whole piece, I'll try to get this pretty close. So under here, there's kind of like a line. It kind of goes like that. Some shadow there. There we go. There's usually a bit of overhang with the brow. But you see how like just dropping in the color, it just starts bringing stuff all together. And see, I can add details with the tones themselves. I love that with Devil. It's like, can dinosaurs smile? T-Rex? Uh, Devil can. Or as close to it as he can muster. Okay, so I won't go into, again, not too much detail, but you kind of get a sense that there's texture here. And you know, the teeth are kind of causing, that's too much shadow, but the teeth have a bit of a shadow to them. Okay, so for the most part, we've gotten that dark tone on Devil, which is, of course, always easier. Now we're going to go jump towards dropping in a shadow or a dark tone on Lunella. And there, of course, because she's sitting on top, of him like that, there is also a shadow here. So I use one basic color for all the tones. Let's see. There is absolutely no light really getting back there. So, when I'm creating these tones, I'm thinking about the shape of the object. And as I'm doing the actual like shadow, I notice I did not do the flats for the whites of her eyes. So I gotta go into the flats at some point. And drop that in. But I put the shadow there, so when that comes through, it should pop. So let's see. I don't really. Sometimes too much shadow is not great. You want to still be clear, especially on small characters where you can't see the detail. So let's erase some of that. Yeah, I think that's better. Yeah, we're almost there. Then we're going to do like a light tone. Okay, so we're almost getting there. Okay, so let's see. Now we're going to do, well, let me add a little texture here. Okay, so we got the dark tones in for the teeth. So yeah, everything's got a bit of shadow to it. All right, so next we're going to do, let me go back into the flats layer and put in the white of her eye. Okay. So we're going to go over to the top and the screen layer, and then we're going to do a light tone. And I usually use like a yellow or something like that. Oh, that's right. We kicked up the screen layer pretty high. Um, let's bring that down to 61% like it was, or something close to that. And the dark tone, we're going to lighten. So there we go. Yeah, I don't like that color for that. Let me use this one. Yeah, that's much better. So this is just highlighting where things are catching the most light. Like the brow here, and then we're going to do like this top ridge. And we're actually going to lighten that up even more. There we go. And sometimes what I actually like to add is a little bit of kind of a light, soft color. Just to kind of punch up the lightness a little bit with a much softer like airbrush. And again, this is all very like super quick, and I'm trying to think, as I'm doing it. I should be wrapping up actually in a minute or two. Let's do a little bit here on Lunella. Okay. And let's give Devil some spots, because that's fun. Yeah, I like to do like little triangles or, squares, something small. And again, this is something else that's super random, right? And this is on a completely separate layer, so it's not on anything that's connected to any other layer. It's sitting right on top. It's its own thing. And when I do these spots, I try to keep in mind that there is a surface. Yeah, and the one thing I didn't do here, because, for time constraints, is to separate the characters. So each color is its own, like it's connected directly to the characters it's related to. I mean, doesn't that just make like a huge difference? Just boom. We got the cool spots in there, right? And let's get some highlights. We're going to put that on the screen layer. And that's it. Once the highlights are done, we're done. Let's see. But yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. There's not much left to do. I mean, I can go in there and do all the nice, clean, perfecting lines and all that stuff, but you guys get it. I'm pretty sure you did. I hope I was thorough in my thought process and you know the ideology behind what goes into doing something like this. But yeah, so we did that in like an hour and a half, I want to say, you know, but that's the piece. And I could go in there and I could noodle that to death, and I could just do some more cleaning up and tighten things up and add even more details and stuff like that. But that's what we were trying to do, and we did it in a super fast time. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the stream, and yeah, thank you so very much.